Sarah walked through the winter night with her newborn held tightly against her chest. The wind pushed against her from every side, making it difficult to even breathe. Her thin shawl did almost nothing to protect her from the freezing cold. Snow reached halfway up her legs, and every step felt heavier than the last. She had never imagined her life would come to this moment, wandering alone through a storm with a baby who had barely lived a few days in this world. But she had no choice. The small frontier settlement she had trusted had turned its back on her when she needed help the most. One harsh argument, one misunderstanding, and suddenly, she had been pushed out, with her child in her arms, and nowhere to go. The cold bit her face and fingers until she could hardly feel them. She kept whispering soft words to her baby, even though she knew the child could not understand them. It was her way of staying calm, her way of fighting back against the fear building in her chest. She said, "It's all right, little one. I'm here. I won't let anything happen to you." But, even as she said the words, she felt her strength slipping away. Her baby's quiet cries mixed with the sound of the wind, and that sound broke her heart. The tiny body pressed against her own felt colder with every passing minute, and she knew she was losing the battle against the winter. The sky was dark, except for a pale moon barely visible behind thick clouds. The land around her was silent and empty, as if the world had abandoned her too. She looked around, hoping to see a house, a cabin, a barn, anything. But all she saw were snow-covered trees stretching endlessly across the land. The cold air stung her throat each time she tried to breathe. Her shoes were soaked through, and her legs shook with exhaustion. She had walked far more than she thought she could, and still there was no sign of safety. She didn't know exactly where she was going. All she knew was that she couldn't stay near the settlement where she had been turned away. Her baby's life depended on finding shelter before the cold stole the last bit of warmth from their bodies. She clutched the child tighter, using her own body to shield him from the wind. She felt the baby stir weakly, and the tiny movement gave her the strength to keep going for a little longer. But her strength wasn't enough. After hours of walking, her legs gave out, and she dropped to her knees in the snow. She held her baby close, trying to cover him completely with her arms and shawl. She whispered, her voice trembling, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Tears rolled down her cheeks, freezing almost instantly. She felt dizzy, and her vision blurred. The cold had reached deep into her bones. She wondered if this was how her story would end with her child in her arms, in the middle of a silent winter night, far away from any help. Just when she felt herself slipping into darkness, she heard a distant sound. It was faint, like a soft crunching of snow under heavy footsteps. At first, she thought it might be her imagination, or worse, wolves. She forced herself to look up, her tired eyes scanning the snowy field. Through the curtain of falling snow, she saw a tall figure moving toward her. Her heart raced with fear, but she couldn't move even if she wanted to. The figure stepped closer, and she could see the outline of a man wearing thick fur clothing. The way he moved showed confidence and strength, like someone familiar with the winter wilderness. He carried a bow on his back and a spear in one hand. The moment he stepped close enough for her to see his face, she realized he was a Sioux hunter. Mato had been traveling through the area on a hunting trip. He was used to walking across long distances and surviving harsh winters. But even he knew how dangerous the weather was tonight. When he noticed a strange shape on the ground, he approached carefully, ready for anything. But when he reached the woman, he immediately understood the situation. This was not a threat, but a tragedy waiting to happen. He crouched beside her and saw the baby trembling inside her arms. He could tell she was close to collapsing completely. Her lips were pale, and her hands shook wildly as she tried to keep hold of her child. She looked up at him through half-open eyes, unable to find the strength to speak. Her breath came out in weak puffs of white mist. Mato knew she would not survive another hour in this cold. The baby certainly wouldn't. He hesitated for only a moment. His people had strict ways, and helping outsiders could lead to unwanted trouble. But he was not the kind of man who could walk away from a mother and newborn fighting for life in the snow. He placed his spear aside and gently reached out. "You need warmth," he said softly, hoping his calm voice would ease her fear. She tried to respond, but no sound came out. Her body shivered uncontrollably. He carefully lifted her into his strong arms, supporting the baby at the same time. Her shawl slipped, and he quickly adjusted it to keep the child covered. He felt how dangerously cold both of them were. Without wasting another second, he stood up and turned toward the shelter he had built nearby for his hunting trips. It wasn't a large place, but it had a roof and a fire pit inside. He moved quickly, his footprints deep in the snow. The storm pushed against him, but he kept moving with determination. He could feel the woman's weak breath against his chest, and knew every minute mattered. The walk to his shelter was difficult even for him. The snow was heavy, and the wind tried to slow him down, but he pressed forward. When he finally pushed open the wooden door, a faint warmth greeted him. Inside, a fire burned low, but it was enough to save them. He carefully laid the woman on a pile of animal skins that served as a bed. Then he took the baby into his arms for a moment, letting his own body warmth help the child. Before passing him back to the mother, he added more wood to the fire and worked quickly to make the room warmer. Sarah slowly began to open her eyes. The warmth felt like a miracle after the freezing cold outside. She looked around, confused at first, then realized she was safe for the moment. Her baby let out a soft cry, a small, tired sound, but it was a sign of life. Mato moved quietly around the shelter, preparing warm broth from a pot he kept for long trips. He poured it into a wooden cup and handed it to her. She struggled to hold it, so he helped guide it to her lips. The warm liquid filled her with new strength. She whispered a faint, "Thank you," her voice barely more than a breath. Mato simply nodded. He didn't expect gratitude. He was only doing what he believed was right. He sat a little distance away, giving her space, but kept watchful eyes on both her and the baby. His presence was calm and steady, like a silent guardian. The baby stirred again, and Sarah held him close, whispering, "We're safe. We're safe now." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were from relief, not fear. Hours passed as the fire burned brighter. Sarah's strength gradually returned. She watched the hunter as he quietly checked his supplies, arranged the woodpile, and made sure the shelter stayed warm enough. She could sense he was a man of deep discipline and kindness. Even though she didn't know him, she felt safe with him, safer than she had felt in a long time. As the night continued, the storm outside grew worse. The wind howled against the wooden walls, but inside the shelter, the warmth protected them. Sarah watched her baby sleep peacefully for the first time since she had been forced out. She didn't know what would happen next or who this man truly was, but in that moment, she felt hope returning to her heart. Mato stayed awake, keeping the fire burning and listening for any danger outside. He didn't know what story had led the woman to be wandering alone with a newborn, but he knew one thing clearly: if he had arrived even a little later, she and her child might not have survived. He looked at the sleeping mother and baby and reminded himself that every life had value, and some choices were worth any risk. That night marked the beginning of a journey neither of them could have imagined. Sarah had been cast out into the cold, with no home, no support, and no hope. But fate had placed the right person on her path, a Sioux hunter with a strong heart and a sense of honor. And because of that, her story, and her baby's story, had been given a second chance. Sarah slowly woke from a light, uneasy sleep. The warmth of the fire reached her face, and for a moment she forgot where she was. Then she felt the soft rise and fall of her baby's breathing against her chest, and reality returned to her mind. The storm outside still howled like a restless beast, but inside the shelter, She felt safe for the first time in many days. She opened her eyes wider and looked around. Mato, the Sioux hunter who had rescued her, was sitting near the fire, adding a small piece of wood to keep the flames alive. He moved with quiet care, making sure not to wake her or the child. She watched him for a moment. He was focused, steady, as if his mind was always alert, even during moments of calm. His long, dark hair hung around his shoulders, and the warm firelight reflected softly against his face. He looked both strong and peaceful at the same time. When he noticed she was awake, he turned his head and gave her a small nod, not wanting to startle her. "You are feeling better?" he asked gently. Sarah nodded, though her body still trembled slightly. "A little," she whispered. Her voice was weak, but not as weak as before. She had regained more strength than she expected. The warmth, food, and safety had worked like medicine. Mato pointed toward a bowl he had placed beside her earlier. "There is warm broth for you again. Drink slowly." Sarah carefully shifted her baby to one arm, then reached for the bowl. Her hands were no longer frozen, but they still shook. She sipped the broth slowly. The warmth spread through her body, calming her nerves and giving her energy. Every small sip felt like a gift. Her baby made a soft sound, half between a cry and a sigh, and she looked down to check on him. He was warmer now, his face no longer pale from the cold. She smiled weakly, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She had been so frightened in the snow, terrified that she would lose him. Now she held him, alive and resting, because of the man sitting a few feet away. The hours passed slowly, with the storm refusing to soften. The wind pushed hard against the walls of the shelter, but the structure held firm. Mato checked it from time to time, ensuring no snow or cold wind slipped inside. He moved with patience, showing no frustration at being trapped indoors by the storm. Sarah watched him work and felt a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. She had never been this close to someone from his people before. She had heard stories, some kind and some full of fear, but none of them matched the man who had saved her life. She wondered what he thought of her. She wondered if he regretted helping her. She looked down at her baby and brushed a hand over his small forehead. No matter what, she owed this man everything. After some silence, Mato finally spoke. "You and your child. How did you end up alone in the snow?" He asked the question carefully. Not in a demanding way, but in a way that showed he truly wanted to understand. Sarah lowered her eyes. It was painful to speak about it, but she felt he deserved to know. "I had nowhere else to go," she said softly. "The people in the settlement, they didn't want to help me. I asked for a place to stay for a few nights after the baby was born. I thought someone would show kindness. But things didn't go well. There were arguments. Some blamed me for things I didn't do. Others said I was a burden. They told me to leave." "Noted?" Mato listened quietly. His expression did not change, but his eyes filled with understanding. Sarah continued, her voice trembling from memory. "I begged them not to send me away. I said I had a newborn and nowhere to go. But no one listened. They just wanted me gone. So I left. I thought I could walk until I found another settlement or a cabin. I didn't realize how strong the storm would become." Her words faded as emotion caught her. She hugged her baby tightly, fighting tears. Mato looked at her with calm sympathy. "You did what you could," he said gently. "The cold is unforgiving. Many strong men would not survive such a night." His words comforted her more than she expected. For the first time since she had been cast out, she didn't feel ashamed. She felt human again. Mato stood and took a few steps toward the fire. He added more wood, then stirred the flames so the heat spread evenly. The cabin grew warmer. Sarah watched him and felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. He moved with such quiet purpose, as if protecting two strangers was simply part of his nature. After another hour, her baby woke up with a soft whimper. She fed him with slow, practiced movements, trying to keep him calm. Mato kept his distance to give her privacy, turning slightly away, while sharpening a small knife near the fire. He was respectful without needing to be asked. His presence felt steady, never intrusive. Once the baby fell asleep again, Sarah finally looked at him. "You saved us," she said softly. I don't know how to thank you." Mato looked up from his work. "There is no need to repay kindness," he said. "Life is difficult. When someone needs help, we should help if we are able." His words were simple, but they reached her heart. Outside, the storm grew even stronger. Snow smacked against the roof like handfuls of frozen stones. The wind howled in long, powerful waves, rattling the small door. Sarah shivered at the sound, imagining herself out there an hour longer, how close she had come to losing everything. Mato rose to check the door again. He pressed against it firmly, testing its strength. Satisfied, he returned to the fire. Sarah watched him quietly. She wondered about his life. Did he have family? Did someone wait for him back in his camp? She had so many questions, but didn't want to burden him with them. The day slowly turned into night again. The shelter had no window, so the only light came from the fire. Mato offered her another bowl of warm broth. She drank it gratefully. Her body felt stronger now, though still tired. "You should rest more," Mato said. "The storm will not stop tonight. There is no need to worry about the time." Sarah nodded. She gently lay down on the animal skins, still holding her baby close. The warmth of the fire soothed her. As she rested, she listened to Mato moving quietly around the shelter, adjusting supplies, checking his equipment, and tending the fire. The sound of his steady footsteps brought her comfort. Moments later, she spoke softly. "You risked yourself by helping me. Why?" "Rever. When risk. When risking." Mato paused for a moment before answering. "My people teach that every life has value," he said. "A mother and child alone in the snow. No hunter with honor would ignore that. If I had walked past you, I would never have known peace again." Sarah felt tears in her eyes, but they were gentle this time, not painful. She whispered, "Thank you." Again, because she had no other words strong enough. As the night deepened, the storm outside raged without mercy. Yet inside the shelter, there was warmth, safety, and a quiet bond forming between two people from different worlds. Sarah lay awake for some time, listening to her baby breathe softly and watching Mato through half-open eyes. He sat by the fire, alert, protective, ready to keep watch the entire night. His kindness felt almost unreal after the cruelty she had faced. It made her heart ache with both gratitude and confusion. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she owed her survival and her baby's survival to this man she had never met before. Slowly, her eyes closed again, and she drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep she hadn't felt since long before her child was born. The fire crackled softly, and Mato kept silent guard, determined to ensure the mother and her newborn would see the morning light safely. Outside, the storm could roar as fiercely as it wanted. Inside, a new chapter of their story had already begun. One built on trust, courage, and the simple but powerful act of saving a life. The storm did not end quickly. By morning, the wind was still wild, and snow piled up higher than the door of the shelter. Sarah woke slowly, feeling the warmth of the fire and the weight of her newborn sleeping against her chest. Her body still felt weak, but she was no longer frozen and helpless like the night before. When she opened her eyes, she saw Mato standing near the doorway, using a wooden tool to push away the snow blocking the entrance. His movements were strong but careful, as if he had done this countless times. He noticed her wake and gave a small nod. "Good morning," he said, in a calm voice. The storm kept us here for another day. Sarah sat up slowly, adjusting the blanket around her and the baby. She felt safer now, but she also felt unsure about what would happen next. She watched as Mato came toward the fire again and added more wood. The flames rose, warming the cabin even more. "Is it safe outside?" she asked quietly. "Not yet," Mato replied. "The snow is deep, and the wind is still dangerous. We stay inside for now." Sarah nodded, holding her baby closer. She felt grateful, but worry began to creep into her mind again. She had nowhere to go once the storm ended. The settlement that had pushed her out offered no hope. She didn't know whether she could reach another town or trading post alone, especially with a newborn. For a moment, fear returned. But seeing Mato's steady presence brought her comfort. He handed her another bowl of warm broth, which she drank gratefully. The warmth brought strength back into her tired body. Her baby stirred, and she gently rocked him until he calmed. As she looked around the small shelter, she began to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. But that peace didn't last long. Late in the afternoon, the wind suddenly changed direction, pressing a loud gust against the wooden walls. Mato stopped what he was doing and listened carefully. Sarah watched him, sensing something was wrong. His expression changed, and he moved toward the door again, placing his ear against it. "What is it?" she asked softly. "Someone is coming," Mato replied. Her heart jumped. "Someone? From where?" Before he could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed outside, heavy footsteps, the kind made by boots. Mato reached for his spear and stood alert. After a moment, the door pushed open, letting a gust of cold air inside. A tall man with a thick fur coat stepped through, shaking snow off his shoulders. Sarah pulled the baby closer, fear rising inside her again. The man was Chayton, Mato's hunting partner. He looked surprised to see a woman and child inside the shelter. His eyes quickly shifted from her to Mato, silently demanding an explanation. Mato stepped between them. Not in a threatening way, but in a protective one. "They were in the snow," he said firmly. "The mother and her newborn would not have survived." Chayton stared at Sarah for a moment, then glanced at the baby. His face tightened, and he let out a breath, not anger, but frustration. "I understand why you helped," he said. "But you know what the elders will say." Sarah felt her chest tighten with fear. She didn't know what elders he spoke of, but she could sense the tension between the two men. She turned slightly away, not wanting to be a problem for Mato. The last thing she wanted was to cause trouble for him. Mato remained calm. "I did not bring them to our camp," he said. Chayton stepped closer to the fire and warmed his hands, his expression serious. "Still," he said, "some will not approve. Outsiders are not often welcomed, especially now." Sarah lowered her eyes. She felt like a burden again, just as she had felt in the settlement. She whispered softly, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble." Mato turned toward her immediately. "You did nothing wrong," he said. "You needed help. Anyone with sense would have done the same." Chayton looked between them and sighed. "The storm will not ease until night. We stay here for now. But tomorrow, we must decide what to do." Sarah felt fear tighten her stomach. She gently rocked her baby, who had begun to stir. She didn't want to get in the way of Mato's life or his people. She wished she could disappear into the snow so he wouldn't face trouble for saving her. But she had her child to protect. She couldn't simply run away. The hours passed slowly. The crackling fire was the only sound for a while. Chayton ate some dried meat from his pack, while Mato continued checking the shelter. Sarah stayed silent, holding her child close and feeling the weight of uncertainty pressing heavily on her. Eventually, Chayton spoke again, his voice more gentle. "Where will you go after the storm?" Sarah looked down. "I don't know," she said softly. "I was hoping Maybe I could find a place near a trading post. Somewhere safe. Somewhere that won't turn us away. Chayton listened quietly. Then he looked at Mato. The nearest trading post is 2 days from here. The snow will slow the journey even more. Mato nodded. We can guide her there. Chayton raised an eyebrow. We? Mato didn't hesitate. She cannot travel alone with a newborn. I will take her. Sarah stared at Mato, surprised by his certainty. She hadn't expected him to risk more for her. Her voice trembled as she whispered, You've already done so much. I don't want you to get in trouble. But Mato shook his head. You and your child deserve safety. That is more important than trouble. Chayton rubbed his forehead, thinking deeply. If the elders find out... He stopped mid-sentence and sighed again. Fine. I will say nothing. But you must be careful. Sarah felt a warm rush of gratitude, and tears formed in her eyes. She whispered, Thank you. Her voice barely audible over the wind. That night, the 3 of them stayed inside the shelter. The storm began to weaken as darkness fell. Chayton eventually slept near the door, while Mato stayed awake beside the fire, watching over mother and child. Sarah tried to sleep, but her mind kept drifting to the dangers ahead. She felt torn between wanting to find safety and not wanting Mato to face trouble because of her. As the fire glowed warmly, she watched him for a long time through half-open eyes. He seemed like someone who carried not just strength, but deep responsibility. That made her feel safe, even in her worry. Morning came slowly. The storm had finally passed, leaving the land covered in a thick, shining blanket of snow. When Mato opened the door, cold but gentle air entered. The sky was clearer than it had been in days. Chayton prepared his pack to return to camp, giving Sarah one more silent nod that seemed to say he understood her situation. You must leave soon, he said to Mato. The elders will expect me to return. We leave within the hour, Mato replied. Chayton stepped outside, and within minutes, he disappeared into the white landscape. Inside the shelter, Sarah held her baby close, watching Mato prepare supplies for the long journey. He packed food, extra furs, and tools. He worked quickly but with thought, making sure nothing important was forgotten. She felt hope again, but also fear. This man was risking so much just to help her. She wondered why he cared so deeply for people he barely knew. When he finally turned to her, she felt her heart tighten with emotion. Sarah looked at him with tears in her eyes. She felt the truth of his words, and it warmed her more than the fire ever could. In that moment, she understood that Mato was not simply helping her out of duty, he truly cared. And so, as the sun rose slowly over the snowy horizon, a new journey began. One filled with uncertainty, danger, and hope. But Sarah knew one thing with complete certainty. She and her baby would face it, with a man who had already proven his courage and his heart. The morning after the storm felt strangely quiet. The world outside the shelter lay covered in deep, clean snow that sparkled when the first rays of sunlight touched it. Sarah stepped outside briefly, carrying her wrapped baby close. The air was cold, but no longer harsh. The sky was clear and wide, reminding her that there was still a world beyond fear and suffering. Mato watched her from the doorway, making sure she didn't slip on the thick snow. He had packed everything they would need for the long journey: food, warm pelts, water, and some tools. Sarah breathed in the cold air and then stepped back inside. The warmth of the fire welcomed her again. Mato looked at the newborn, who was sleeping peacefully despite the cold morning. Sarah brushed a finger lightly along the baby's cheek and then turned to Mato. Is it a long journey? She asked. He nodded. It will take 2 days, maybe 3 with the snow this deep. But we will reach the trading post safely. Sarah's heart filled with a mix of relief and nervousness. She trusted Mato because he had saved them, protected them, and shown her kindness without asking for anything in return. But the world outside was huge and uncertain. Still, she had no choice. The trading post was her best hope for finding a new beginning. Mato helped her step onto a small sled he had built from sturdy branches. He covered her and the baby with thick furs, tucking them gently so the wind would not touch them. When she looked up at him, he gave her a reassuring nod. "We travel slowly," he said. "You and the child must stay warm." With strong, steady steps, he began pulling the sled. The snow was deep, but his strength and skill made the movement smooth. Sarah watched him as he led them across the bright white land. His back was straight, and every step looked confident. She realized he had traveled these lands many times. She felt safe, even in the silence of the wilderness. The early hours passed quietly. The trees stood tall and heavy with snow, and the sound of Mato's boots pressing into the ground mixed with the soft crunch of the sled moving behind him. Birds didn't sing, and no wind blew. The world seemed frozen in peaceful stillness. Sarah rested her head back, letting the warmth of the furs sink into her tired bones. She spoke softly. "Thank you again for everything." Mato slowed his steps a little and looked over his shoulder. "There is no need to thank me," he said. "You are human. I am human. We help each other." Sarah smiled at his simple but powerful words. Few people she had met in recent months had thought that way. As the day went on, Mato stopped from time to let Sarah stretch her legs and warm her feet near a small fire he built quickly. He checked the baby often, without getting too close, just enough to make sure the child was comfortable. His respect made Sarah feel even safer. There was no fear, no confusion, only calmness. Later that afternoon, clouds began gathering again, but not in a threatening way. They brought a soft, slow snowfall that drifted gently around them like tiny white feathers. Sarah watched the flakes land on her baby's blanket, then melt into tiny droplets. She felt like the world was giving her a fresh start, washing away the hurt of the settlement that had abandoned her. When evening approached, Mato led them to a sheltered area between two large rocks where the wind could not reach. He set up a small camp, building a fire with practiced hands. Sarah sat close, warming her baby and herself while Mato hunted nearby. He returned with enough food to cook a simple, warm meal. Sarah ate gratefully, the flavor comforting after so many days of hunger and fear. That night, Sarah slept deeper than she had in a long time. She could hear the fire crackling, and she could feel Mato's quiet presence nearby as he kept watch. The baby slept peacefully too, wrapped in furs and resting in the safety of his mother's arms. Mato stayed awake, listening to the night, making sure nothing came near them. The next morning, the journey continued. The snow wasn't as deep now, and the sky was brighter. Sarah felt stronger, another martyr, and her baby seemed more relaxed. Mato walked ahead with the same steady steps, never showing signs of exhaustion, though he must have been tired. In the afternoon of the second day, they reached higher ground, and Mato pointed to something ahead. In the far distance, Sarah saw a faint line of smoke rising into the sky. "That is the trading post," Mato said. Sarah gasped softly. After so many days of fear, cold, and uncertainty, the sight of smoke from a chimney felt like salvation. Her heart beat faster with relief. "We're close," she whispered to her baby with a trembling smile. As they continued forward, the shape of the trading post slowly appeared: small wooden buildings, a tall fence to keep out wild animals, and a few horses tied near the entrance. When they reached the gate, Mato stopped and gently helped Sarah step off the sled. He made sure she was standing strong before lifting her baby into her arms. A man from the trading post stepped outside, looking surprised to see them. "You look frozen," he said with concern. "Come inside, quickly." Two women hurried over as well, helping Sarah walk. They gently touched her baby's blanket and smiled warmly. "We'll get you settled," one of the women said kindly. "You're safe here." Sarah turned to Mato, suddenly overwhelmed. She felt so many emotions at once: gratitude, sadness, relief, and something else she couldn't describe. She didn't want to leave his side, but she also knew this was where she needed to be. Mato stood quietly, his expression calm but thoughtful. "I don't know how to say goodbye," she admitted softly. "You saved our lives. You gave us warmth, food, and safety. I can never repay you." Mato looked at her baby first, then at her. His voice was gentle. "You owe me nothing. I only did what any person with a heart should do." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes, not from sadness, but from gratitude so deep it was hard to speak. She carefully lifted her baby's tiny hand and held it toward Mato. The baby's small fingers curled around the hunter's larger one. Mato smiled, a rare and soft smile that warmed Sarah's heart. "He will grow strong," Mato said quietly, "because you are strong." Sarah covered her mouth to keep from crying. She whispered, "You gave us hope again. I will never forget you." Mato stepped back slowly. He didn't want to make the farewell harder. He reached for his pack, slung it over his shoulder, and looked toward the snowy path he had come from. "Stay safe," he said. "This place will give you what you need." Four. She nodded, wiping tears before they fell. "And you? May your path always be safe, too." For a moment, they simply stood there, two people from different worlds who had shared a life-changing journey. Then Mato turned and began walking back into the snowy forest, his figure growing smaller with every step. Sarah held her baby close and watched until he disappeared behind the trees. Inside the trading post, people welcomed her with warmth. They offered her food, a bed, and a small room to stay in. She finally felt secure. But even as she settled into safety, her thoughts kept drifting back to the hunter who had risked everything to save a stranger and her newborn. She knew that someday, when her child was old enough to understand, she would tell him the full story. She would tell him about the storm, about the fear, about the night she thought all hope was gone, and about the Sioux hunter named Mato, who came through the snow and changed their lives forever. Because some acts of kindness did not fade with time. They lived on, in memories, in stories, and in the hearts of those who survived because of them. And Sarah vowed she would never forget the man who taught her that even in the coldest winter, humanity could still shine warm and bright.